Hi everybody, my name is Simon Forster, and it's great to be here. And first off, Paula, it's absolutely a socio-technical challenge, and I completely agree with you. So my talk is going to be a little different from the previous two. This is one that I gave at KubeCon previously in April, so I've updated it a little bit. But it's quite business focused, and it's all around the really high level challenges that as engineers and as architects we face. Just to introduce myself, I'm a technical architect, officially is my title. I work in financial services and I put together platforms for HPC, market data, and now flow trading, which is kind of fun. And I'm also an ambassador for the CNCF. So I love cheesy AI. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the cloud native investment dilemma that we have. And this is really about when we as engineers and as architects talk to our senior managers. So often we have a lot of discussion around, well, what is cloud or cloud native going to do for us? Is it going to save us money? Or with a little bit of skepticism at times, is it going to increase our costs? And then also some of the other challenges that large organizations face, and that's the space that I work in. We often have to deal with CapEx and OpEx and really nasty budget topics as well. And then also, when are we going to get the savings? When's it going to all pay off? And then finally, there's often questions around, are we actually over-engineering? Are we creating complexity, or are we reducing friction? Because everything that we do incurs costs, potentially. So what I want to talk a bit about is really around how we can talk to our bosses around justifying cloud native investment. And there's a few techniques that we can do. And a lot of these have been around for a long time, but it's really important to reiterate them because actually they haven't disappeared as we've invested in and moved towards cloud native. So we've got developer efficiency, and Paul has just given you a fantastic update on what we can do there with platforms to help them out. There's also risk reduction. And in my world, that's everything really. Like, how can we make sure that this works when it has to, because it needs to. And then finally, it's those costs of maintaining those systems really. So changing how we pay for stuff. So I'm just going to run through a few examples, and with my AI generated warning sign, these are not perfect examples. I'm not an accountant, by the way, and I'll keep it really low. Okay, but the point is to start to get you thinking about how we can communicate this stuff. So I'm just going to run through three different scenarios, and the first one I'm going to talk about is a churn rate example. And this really applies to startups and often, or companies that are offering services to customers where there's a lot of churn. So we might have a situation where we've got rising churn because we're not delivering features quick enough and our competitors are shipping faster. And so our sales and our customer success are actually impacted as a result of this. So we might want to get that churn down from 10% down to around 5% or so. So we also want to go and deliver features 50% faster. Now, ideally, it's a lot quicker than that, but sometimes the real world gets involved as well. And so our job might be to cut release times from 2 days to 1 day. And I hope there's a few of you laughing at this, saying we can do it a hell of a lot quicker than that. That would be ideal. But we also have organizations that might deal with releases in weeks or even months. That's still a thing. So our job might be to build a lightweight platform using open source tools or Cratix to accelerate releases. So we're going to do it in 6 weeks, of course, because we're heroes, and we're going to establish our teams and have ongoing support. So we can talk about the revenue that's at risk. It might be if a customer is worth £2,000 a year to us, and we've got 2,000 customers. You know, if we can get a 400k loss due to churn down to 200k, that's a success. So we might have a set of investment. We've got a couple of engineers, some training, and we work out that it's going to be about £46,000, whatever, to run this. Now, if we can demonstrate some output from that, if we can lower the churn down to say 2%, our annual recurring revenue is reduced, and we get a reduction in churn, and that adds to the bottom line. So we can put together a business justification for this. And the key thing is that embedded within this is we might have a CI/CD platform that we are implementing or optimizing. And by phrasing this within the language of business and money, and these are high-level examples, but you'll be surprised at the power of working with them. As engineers and technologists, we know that we can go and build something as long as we have a business justification for it. So the aim of this is to allow you to get to actually do the stuff you want to do. Then there's the risk topic as well. So I think we might be familiar with this. This is an American example. Delta, lost 400 million as a result of a supply chain problem with CrowdStrike. So there's a few dimensions to this. There was brand damage, lost revenue, and if that were a financial institution, there might be fines involved in this as well. And of course, being out of the market. So that's one of the problems that we face. Obviously, the goal for our businesses is retaining reliability, protect revenue, and retain our customers. So we might have a goal of 99.95% uptime, and we might work out what we're going to save as a result of that. So our job is to go and build infrastructure to service these customers. So we might decide, okay, we'll go and put our services in multiple regions, HA and asynchronous replication. We might all be fairly familiar with those patterns, depending on your cloud service provider or your internal infrastructure. So we're going to do it in 6 weeks because we're heroes, okay? And we'll use Cratix. So we might say, well, it's expensive to run this. And often when we go and present numbers, okay, well, if we're going to implement all of this, it might cost us, if we're a large company, €100,000, per month, depending on the applications or the systems. And that's expensive, okay? But if we deal with downtime, okay, it might be very low for a small startup. It could even be zero, just a bunch of reputational damage that needs to be mopped up. But for an enterprise, that might be, €7.5 million of downtime as a result of an hour's downtime. So these are the sorts of losses. And if you've ever worked on enterprise architecture in a large organization, there'll often be matrices that we work with around risk, probability, what's it cost, how likely is it going to happen? And this is the type of thing that can really help us. So if we do that investment, when we say, if we do not make this investment, these are the risks that we run, okay, including the fines, that can often be a really strong carrot for getting buy-in. And then finally, we might have an infrastructure modernization example. As has been mentioned this evening, how often do we start with a greenfield site? Not often. There's a lot of legacy architecture and infrastructure around the place that we deal with, that we're all familiar with. So we might want to free up capital and lower financial risk. And this sounds a little bit weird. And a motivation, particularly for a senior manager, might be to shift from CapEx to OpEx. But I'm not an accountant, and why do I care about this? Well, the reason why we care about this is that every time I go and procure a data center full of servers, if I go and make a purchase order for £1 million worth of kit and stick it in a data center and run it for 5 years, I've actually converted cash into hardware, but that's still on the books, and I've got this fixed asset. I've got all of this money tied up in tin, okay, that in 3 years isn't going to run as fast as the stuff I can get from Google. So we might want to go and reduce our infrastructure costs, so deal with that lump of costs that we have within the data center, and we might want to accelerate our application delivery. Hooray for platforms and CI/CD again. So our job is to modernize, and we might adopt a cloud-native container-based platform. So it might take 2 or 3 years, and for this, we can do something like a really basic ROI type calculation. The point is to say, well, if we go and run a program, we get our costs down from 3 million to 2.5 million a year to run this. It costs us $1 million to run the project and carry out everything we need. Or we break it even in 2 years, and in 3 years we really get a good return on investment. And we're keeping up with Moore's law as well, because I get a constant hardware refresh as I go and if I put stuff in a public cloud service provider, if Google and Microsoft are doing the heavy work for the hardware refreshes for me, I don't have to worry about that. And that's really important for some systems. Now, again, the point is, embedded within all of this is the ability for us to go and implement platforms, take advantage of cloud native, and really build up continue that investment that we're already making, and just do cool stuff. So a few things to sort of think about when we're dealing with our senior managers and communicating. I've talked about getting out of that OPEX and CAPEX thing. One point to mention about this is that often we've all been there where we've had somebody come to us maybe and say, this service is costing me this many thousand per month. Well, we were already paying that, except all of that cash we spent upfront 2.5 years ago loading it all into a data center. So it's really important to have that conversation, and it's something to point out when we want to do stuff. Another thing that we can all do is take advantage of upcoming deadlines. Okay, if our infrastructure is due for a refresh, or we've got a new application upgrade coming, it might be something like a Murex or something. It could be something big, or it could be something else. A lot of applications are transforming. They're moving to cloud-native platforms themselves, and can we support it on-premise with our existing way of doing stuff? So we can take advantage of these milestones and deadlines within an organization to refresh. And then we can also go and take advantage of new laws. There's the EU DORA Act, which imposes a huge amount of restrictions on institutions around making sure that they can continue delivering critical services all the time. It's easier to do that with a cloud service provider. Consider your exit strategies as well, and read the papers. There's some real great gems in there about that. And then the final thing is we can reduce risk. And one thing that a lot of organizations don't have a lot of tolerance for is any risk. And risk can be our real friend when we're advocating for change. So this all brings us back to, well, if we're going to be discussing change within our org and how we want to go and do something, sometimes it really pays for us to know who our customer actually is and to tie it back to them. We want our customers to be happy. We don't want them to leave us. We don't want them to be stranded waiting for a service that we're offering that isn't working. And that's particularly the case with airlines and other services like that as well. And then what are the outcomes that they seek? So think very carefully around how we're serving our customers, and what we can do can really help them, because that'll convince your management. And then how we do that, well, it's a technology decision, and that's over to us, and that's for us to figure out. That's the fun. So there is some YAML for that, by the way, and Kube Control's a great help as well. So key takeaways: understand your application and your technical landscape, okay? And then also Coming to Paula's point around it being a socio and cultural technical, and I think a really cultural thing, it's I can't advocate for a technology on the basis of the technology itself. As much as I love something, I can make a really strong case for it if I know that it's going to help my business's bottom line or its ability to operate. I avoided an incident tonight with GitOps because I reverted a change that took place in a change window that didn't work properly, and I reverted the commit. That is fantastic, and that's a cloud native capability I was able to use to keep my organization going. And always start small and scale up. Work on the things that you know you can do well. It's an obvious thing, but try not to boil an ocean. Build on your proven successes. And if your goals can line up with a bottom line or a reduction in headaches, then you're going to win and you'll get your product or your platform approved. So a little bit of a sales pitch here. I'm involved in the CNCF. I'm the co-chair of a working group that developed the Cloud Native Maturity Model. We're working hard on this at the moment, and we're thinking carefully around return on investment and business outcomes. So we'd really love any input, any thoughts from anybody, because this is a really big topic, because it's usually somebody's got to pay for it. So this is me. There's my details there. I don't think we have any time for questions, but please do feel free to come up at the end.